There comes a point, sometimes years after a relationship has ended, when the narcissist is forced to face what they spent their entire life avoiding, the realization that they ruined something irreplaceable. This awareness rarely arrives in a dramatic flash. Instead, it builds slowly through the quiet weight of comparison. After driving away the person who truly loved them, the narcissist doesn't stop searching for connection. They continue the familiar cycle of pursuit, idealization, and consumption. New partners appear, new sources of validation, new people to temporarily fill the emptiness inside. At first, these relationships deliver what they always do: the brief swelling of the ego, the thrill of being wanted, the comfort of not sitting alone with themselves. But over time, something shifts, often before the narcissist consciously acknowledges it. The new relationships feel different. Conversations lack depth. Intimacy feels staged rather than sincere. The bond exists, yet remains strangely shallow, even after months or years. In quiet moments, late at night, when keeping up the facade becomes exhausting, or in the spaces between relationships, when they are left alone with their thoughts, they begin to compare. They remember conversations with their former partner that carried meaning, that reached something real, that made them feel understood in ways they failed to value at the time. They recall authentic moments of closeness they either dismissed or sabotaged because true intimacy felt dangerous. Gradually, often with great resistance, they see that what they once had was not just another relationship. It was fundamentally different. The person they lost did not love the performance, the mask, the carefully constructed image. They loved the real individual underneath, the wounded, fractured, frightened self the narcissist works so hard to conceal. This realization is devastating because it exposes what they have never been able to reproduce: authentic love. Not admiration, not infatuation, not trauma-bonded attachment, but genuine love that saw them fully and chose them anyway. Each new partner becomes a reminder of that loss. They may be with someone attractive, successful, devoted, yet they feel the emptiness. They sense this person does not know them the way the former partner did, does not grasp them as deeply, does not connect at the same level. Worse still, they understand that this superficiality is their own creation. They ensure no one gets close enough to truly know them, because being known once ended in abandonment means they are trapped in a cycle where they can only form connections with people who never fully see them, which means those bonds can never satisfy their deeper longing to be understood and loved. The one person who broke through their defenses, who achieved genuine intimacy, despite their pathology, is the very one they destroyed through betrayal, devaluation, and cruelty. And in their rare moments of clarity, this becomes unbearable. They cannot undo it. They cannot return to choose differently. The damage was too complete, too harsh, too thorough. The person who once loved them freely had to build unbreakable boundaries simply to survive. That love was not withdrawn out of spite, but out of necessity. In these undefended moments, the narcissist understands they are searching in every new relationship for something they once possessed and destroyed. They are trying to recreate a depth of connection that existed only because one extraordinary person could see beyond their defenses and love them anyway. That person is gone, not because the love faded, but because the narcissist made staying impossible. This creates a unique torment. Every new relationship is shadowed by the memory of the one that was real. Each partner is unconsciously compared to someone who cannot be replaced, not because of specific traits, but because of their rare ability to love completely and authentically. But And the narcissist may never voice this recognition. They may suppress it the moment it surfaces, inventing elaborate stories to avoid confronting it directly. Yet beneath the surface of their awareness, they know. They know they encountered real love once, and they destroyed it. Everything since has been performance and transaction, a hollow attempt to fill a void carved out by their own choices. Most painfully, they know this was not done to them. It was done by them. They cannot blame circumstances or construct a convincing victim narrative under honest reflection. In whatever measure they can access truth, they understand they chose pathology over partnership, defense over depth, the familiar prison of narcissism over the terrifying freedom of being truly loved. Their private hell is not solid. It is being surrounded by people while knowing the one person who made them feel less alone is gone forever because they forced them to leave. Mumda. There is, however, another path to this breaking point. It comes not through comparison with new relationships, but through confronting their own repeating patterns. When this awareness pierces their defenses, it carries a particular devastation. Narcissists are skilled at shifting blame outward. Each failed relationship can be explained away. That partner was too needy, this one too distant, one did not understand them, another demanded too much. Every ending receives its own narrative in which the narcissist is either the misunderstood victim or the enlightened one who outgrew a limiting bond, but eventually the pattern repeats too often to ignore. When the third relationship collapses, like the first two, when the fifth partner leaves citing the same complaints as the previous four, when the story of bad luck or wrong choices becomes implausible, even to them, slowly, not in a single dramatic revolution, but through creeping awareness, they recognize the common factor in every failed connection. Themselves, Chanda. Each relationship begins the same way, with intense idealization. The new partner is perfect, exceptional, everything they claim to have been searching for. There is love bombing, grand gestures, promises of forever, declarations that this bond is unlike any before. In those early weeks or months, the narcissist may genuinely believe it will be different this time. This person is different. They have changed, they have learned. Yet the cycle inevitably resumes. Idealization shifts into devaluation. The once perfect partner becomes flawed. Minor annoyances grow into major grievances. Criticism increases, while empathy fades. Behavior turns erratic, cutting, calculated to maintain control while pushing away true closeness. Eventually comes the ending. Either they discard the partner after extracting what they need, or the partner gathers enough strength to walk away. The arc remains unchanged. Idealization, devaluation, discard. Different faces, identical script, banned. For a long time, the narcissist can avoid seeing this repetition by focusing on the specific details of each relationship. But after enough cycles, those details blur into an undeniable pattern. And in rare moments of clarity, perhaps after another painfully familiar breakup, perhaps when alone and emotionally unguarded, they face a difficult truth. They are the pattern. Relationships do not fail because they consistently choose the wrong people, but because they consistently remain the same person. They rely on the same defenses, the same manipulation, the same rise and fall of idealization and devaluation that make lasting intimacy impossible, And what makes this realization especially devastating in relation to the one who truly loved them is that person loved them despite the pattern. That person saw the cycles, recognized the defensive strategies, understood the pathology, and chose to stay anyway, not out of weakness or codependency, but out of sincere love and the conviction that beneath those patterns was someone worthy of being loved. In rare moments of uneasy clarity, the narcissist begins to understand that the one person willing to endure their behaviors, who possessed both the depth to comprehend them and the strength to maintain boundaries within the relationship, is the very person they pushed away through the same patterns they can no longer deny. Menja. This produces a distinct kind of regret because the narcissist realizes, however briefly, that they were loved not in ignorance of who they were, but with full awareness of it. Someone saw the wounded child beneath the grandiosity, the fear beneath the anger, the fragmentation beneath the performance, and offered love regardless. And what did the narcissist do with that extraordinary gift? They treated that person as they treat everyone else. They subjected them to the same devaluation, the same manipulation, the same repetitive cycles that make real intimacy impossible. Their pathology flattens all relationships into sameness. They cannot distinguish between shallow admiration and profound devotion because they respond to both in the same destructive way. Recognizing that they ruin something precious using the very patterns they are only now beginning to see as their own is deeply destabilizing. It suggests the issue was never that the relationship was flawed or that the partner was unsuitable. The issue was that their patterns rendered genuine connection unsustainable. Slowly, the narcissist begins to grasp that they are not searching for the right person. They are being the wrong one. They are the one who turns intimacy into threat, love into transaction, connection into control. And the person who loved them understood this, tolerated it, attempted to work within it until it became impossible to continue. Perhaps most devastating of all is the realization that if they could not sustain a relationship with someone that perceptive, that patient, that willing to believe in their potential, then the solution is not a better partner. The problem is internal, structural, woven into how they relate to everyone. When they finally see themselves as the consistent factor in every failed bond and recognize that they applied the same destructive patterns to the one person who truly loved them, the breaking point arrives. They did not merely lose someone. They proved to themselves that they cannot maintain the very thing they crave most, authentic connection with someone who genuinely knows them. Once you see that you are the pattern, you can no longer blame the one who loved you in spite of it. The responsibility settles in. Then comes a different kind of reckoning, one that emerges from outside their inner world, a moment beyond their control, beyond reinterpretation or excuse. It happens when they witness, directly or indirectly, their former partner's authentic happiness. Not a staged performance of moving on, not a defensive show of doing better, but unmistakable, grounded flourishing. It might appear on social media, photographs capturing a relaxed joy the narcissist never saw during the relationship, unguarded laughter, ease, lightness. Or it may come through mutual friends mentioning casually how well the former partner is doing, how peaceful they seem, how much they have changed. Perhaps it is a chance encounter at a social gathering or a familiar place where the narcissist sees firsthand that this person has fundamentally shifted in their absence. There is something different in their presence, either newly found or long suppressed, that has now been reclaimed. Menza. What strikes the narcissist most forcefully is that this is not the anxious, hyper-vigilant person they remember toward the end. This is not someone still stuck in pain or processing the aftermath. This is someone who has moved through the experience and emerged not just intact, but expanded. They speak with confidence that once seemed absent. They set boundaries effortlessly. They laugh without the strain that once edged their joy. They pursue interests, nurture friendships, and build a life visibly richer than the one they had within the relationship. And this visible thriving sends a message that cannot be denied. The former partner is not diminished by the loss. They are not barely surviving, which would at least preserve the narcissist's sense of significance. Instead, they are demonstrably better, happier, steadier, more whole. And this exposes a truth the narcissist has long avoided. The dysfunction in the relationship was tied to their presence, not the partner's inadequacy. The traits they criticized, being too sensitive, too needy, too emotional, were not inherent flaws. They were responses to existing in a destabilizing environment. The anxiety was a nervous system reacting appropriately to unpredictability and manipulation. The neediness was a desperate attempt to secure basic emotional safety where it was withheld. The emotional volatility was what happens when someone is repeatedly invalidated and made to doubt their reality. And remove the narcissist and the problems dissolve. The person who once seemed difficult or flawed is now thriving. In ways that make it clear they were never the issue. The relationship was, more precisely, the narcissist was. They see that this person did not require them to be happy. If anything, they required the narcissist's absence to access happiness. What was labeled dependency was often self-diminishment, shrinking to accommodate someone else's pathology. The love that flowed so freely was not proof of the narcissist's exceptional worth, but evidence of the partner's remarkable capacity to love, now directed toward people and pursuits that nourish rather than drain them. This realization overturns the narcissist's former narrative. They believed, consciously or not, that their partner was fortunate to have them, that their attention and occasional affection were prizes. Watching the former partner flourish reveals the opposite. The partner was sacrificing their well-being, peace, and wholeness to maintain a bond with someone incapable of reciprocity. Once they stopped sacrificing themselves, once they reclaimed the energy poured into the narcissist, they blossomed in ways never supported or inspired by the relationship. In moments when this truth slips past their defenses, the narcissist recognizes something painful. They were not elevating their partner. They were exhausting them. They were not the prize. They were the burden finally set down. The relationship did not end because the partner failed to appreciate greatness. It ended because the partner finally valued themselves enough to stop accepting harm. Perhaps most painful is the recognition that the former partner happiness does not depend on replacing them with someone superior. They may have found a healthier relationship, but their flourishing stems primarily from no longer being entangled with someone whose presence was corrosive. The narcissist is forced to confront a devastating conclusion. This person offered real love and authentic connection, and the narcissist responded by eroding their well-being until leaving became necessary for survival. Now, in living color, the former partner demonstrates what the narcissist refused to see, that they were never broken. When the person you convinced was damaged begins to thrive, the moment you are gone, you can no longer deny that you were the one causing the damage. There is yet another way this breaking point emerges, not through comparison, not through pattern recognition, not through witnessing happiness, but through crisis. Real crisis. the kind that strips away image and performance and reveals what remains when everything else collapses. Perhaps it is serious illness, sudden loss, or an episode of profound existential despair. Something occurs that pierces the narcissist's defenses in a way daily life rarely does, And in that moment of genuine vulnerability, they reach for their phone, scroll through their contacts, and confront a stark realization. The person who once would have answered without hesitation, who would have shown up with steady presence and unwavering care, is no longer there. There's no one to call. Not literally no one. The narcissist usually has plenty of names in their phone, plenty of people who might pick up. But there is no one who will show up in the way they suddenly, desperately need. No one who will arrive without judgment, without requiring the story to be polished, without expecting the narcissist to perform composure or gratitude. No one who will simply be there because they care about the adored narcissist's well-being, independent of what they receive in return. Lemda. In that moment, the narcissist confronts the true quality of the relationships they have built. And what they discover in a time of genuine need is a network of transactions, conditional loyalties, and people who are present for the image, but absent for the truth. They're individuals who will help if it benefits them, if it's convenient, if the crisis is framed in a flattering way. There are enablers who offer shallow comfort while quietly reinforcing avoidance of accountability. There are new sources of validation who don't know them deeply enough to provide real solace. There are former friends who have learned that the narcissist's emergencies often mask bids for attention, Amanda. But there is no one who holds them the way people hold those they truly love. No one whose concern is uncomplicated, whose support is steady, who shows up not out of obligation or gain, but because they genuinely care, And in that sharp moment of recognition, the narcissist remembers that once there was someone like that, someone who would have been the unquestioned emergency contact, someone who would have come without hesitation, who would have sat beside them in darkness without demanding they perform strength, the person they destroyed, the one whose love extended beyond performance, who saw them at their lowest and still remained compassionate, who had the emotional strength to hold both their grandiosity and their fragility without collapsing under either, whose love did not depend on charm, success, or spectacle. It simply existed. The narcissist drove that person away, not only through dramatic betrayals, though those may have occurred, but through the steady erosion of being treated as a function instead of a human being, as supply rather than partner, as someone whose needs were inconvenient and whose feelings could be dismissed. Eventually, that person chose self-preservation because the narcissist consistently chose pathology over partnership, And now, in real crisis, the consequence becomes unavoidable. The one individual who would have dropped everything, whose love could have weathered even this storm, is permanently unavailable because the narcissist made it so. This is not about physical isolation. It is about being surrounded by people and recognizing that none of them possess the depth to hold what is actually happening. It is about scrolling through dozens, perhaps hundreds, of contacts and knowing none represent what was once present and then destroyed. For the first time, the narcissist may begin to grasp the difference between having people around you and being genuinely loved, the difference between connections based on utility and bonds rooted in who you are, The difference between support that evaporates under strain and love that remains steady, even when you are at your worst. Minton, they realized they once had the latter, someone who knew their worst traits, witnessed their cruelest moments, and still anchored their care in something enduring. Someone who would have been a soft place to land when everything else collapsed. But that person endured such persistent disregard, habitual devaluation, and foundational disrespect that building permanent walls became the only path to survival. Those walls are not cruelty. They are protection. Yet they mean that in the narcissist's hour of true vulnerability, the one person capable of offering unconditional presence cannot be reached. The narcissist sees that they have spent a lifetime cultivating shallow ties while dismantling the only deep one. They prioritized image over authenticity, manipulation over intimacy, control over closeness. In crisis, the cost of those priorities is undeniable. No one truly knows them. No one loves them separate from the persona. No one shows up when showing up requires sacrifice. Man, the most painful truth is not that they are alone in this moment. It is that they did not have to be. There was someone who would have walked through this fire with them. Someone with both the love and resilience to endure the hard seasons, but their pathology could not tolerate that degree of real connection while it was available. And now, when they crave it most, it is irretrievably gone. You rarely understand the worth of unconditional love until the conditions you created have driven it permanently away. Ton. There is yet another dimension to this reckoning, one that often emerges later in life and carries a particular existential weight. It arrives when mortality shifts from abstraction to reality, when aging, illness, or the steady passage of time makes finitude undeniable. And with that awareness comes a question that pierces beneath ego. Will I die having been truly loved? Jen. This is not about legacy, reputation, or the impression left on the world. It is more primal than that. It is the basic human need to know we matter to someone, that we were seen fully and cherished anyway. As time becomes visibly limited, the narcissist begins to inventory their relational history. And if honesty is possible, what they find is a trail of admiration cultivated, performances applauded, desires satisfied, but very little that resembles authentic love. They have been wanted for what they could offer: status, excitement, validation, reflected importance. They have been tolerated by those who benefited from proximity. They have been admired, envied, pursued, but loved, truly loved in a way that penetrated the facade, accepted their humanity, endured their flaws. That happened once with the person they destroyed. Now, confronted with finite time, the possibility becomes unbearable. They may have already encountered their one chance at genuine love and extinguished it. They may live out the remainder of their years that now feel limited, never again experiencing that depth of connection. And this realization is devastating because it cannot be undone. When youth stretches ahead, there is always the comfort of imagined future chances. Loss, however painful, still exists within possibility. But as the years accumulate and patterns harden, that horizon narrows. The narcissist senses that they are unlikely to change in any fundamental way. The same pathology that ruined that relationship still operates, still blocks authentic intimacy, And even if transformation were theoretically possible, requiring sustained vulnerability and honest self-confrontation, time is not infinite. They are unlikely to encounter another person with that same depth, that same capacity to love beyond defenses. And even if such a person appeared without inner change, the cycle would likely repeat. Manda? So they face a haunting prospect. They may die surrounded yet unloved. There may be people present at the end, out of duty, proximity, or convention, but none who truly know them beneath the performance. No one who cherishes the unguarded self. In unprotected moments, an image emerges, not physical solitude, but existential aloneness. A bedside occupied by faces who care in limited ways, but no hand held by someone who understands the entire story. They imagine an alternate life, one in which they did not drive that person away, one in which love deepened across decades, one in which they approached their final days beside someone who had walked the entire journey with them and loved them within it, And they recognized that they traded that possibility. They exchanged the chance to be genuinely loved at the end of life, for the preservation of their defenses, for the maintenance of a false self, for the avoidance of the vulnerability authentic love demands. They chose pathology over partnership, and now they face the consequences of that decision across the remainder of their finite life. Alongside the existential loss comes a practical one. The person who loved them would have stood beside them through aging, illness, and decline. They would have attended medical appointments, advocated when the narcissist no longer could, made painful decisions guided by genuine concern. But that person is gone. They have rebuilt, perhaps found someone capable of returning their depth of love. They are not coming back, not open to reconciliation, not available to shepherd the narcissist through life's final chapters. And what remains are the relationships the narcissist actually cultivated, shallow, conditional, transactional bonds. And now they must face the stage of life that demands precisely the kind of committed, unconditional devotion they dismantled. This regret is heavier than the earlier kind. In youth, regret still carries hope. You can change, choose differently, find new love. But with age, when patterns feel entrenched and time visibly short, regret hardens into something irreversible. It becomes the awareness that certain possibilities have been permanently closed. Lambda. The narcissist begins to grasp that they did not simply lose a partner. They lost their singular experience of authentic love and lost it in a way that cannot be recreated within the time they have left. They dismantled the relationship that could have given their life meaning and depth beyond achievements, conquests, or admirers. And now they must live out their remaining years knowing this. They once had someone who would have loved them through everything, even death, and they chose their defenses instead. Now they will likely die as they lived, surrounded by people yet profoundly alone. When you realize the one person who would have loved you until your final breath is gone, because you protected your ego over their devotion, mortality feels unbearable. Amand. There is, however, a rarer breaking point, almost never sustained, but deeply revealing when it occurs. It happens when the narcissist's defenses collapse entirely, when stripped of their usual strategies of avoidance and distortion. They allow themselves, perhaps briefly in therapy, perhaps in solitude, to feel the full weight of what they have done. Not the polished narrative, not the version where circumstances or incompatibility explain the loss, but the stark truth: someone loved them authentically, and they destroyed that love through repeated cruelty, betrayal, and emotional harm. This moment is extraordinarily rare because it requires suspending the very structures that protect the narcissist from shame. They must drop the grandiosity that shields them, release the victim stance that deflects blame, relinquish the justifications that prevent accountability. They must sit undefended with the consequences of their own choices. What emerges in that exposure is devastating clarity. They see, perhaps for the first time, that they are the architects of their own isolation. The emptiness of their connections, the hollowness of admiration, the inability to secure real intimacy. All of it traces back to patterns they maintain to preserve a false self. They recall specific acts of cruelty, words designed to wound, betrayals rationalized as necessity, systematic devaluation of someone who deserved tenderness. They see how they weaponized vulnerability, how they used intimate knowledge as leverage, how they turned what could have been sanctuary into conflict. John, that they recognize that their behavior was never strength. It was fear. Fear of being truly known. Fear of dependence. Fear of the vulnerability authentic love requires. Betrayal was not independence. It was an attempt to maintain control and avoid confronting emotional need. Every act of harm was rooted in fragmentation and terror of intimacy. And the person who loved them understood this, endured it, tried to love them through it, until self-preservation demanded departure. Mummed in this undefended moment, the narcissist feels something unfamiliar and searing, appropriate guilt, not performative remorse meant to elicit sympathy, not self-pity masquerading as accountability, but genuine recognition of harm inflicted on someone who did not deserve it. They feel the weight of having taken a rare and extraordinary gift, someone's deep, unconditional love, and exploiting it. They realize that many people never experience such love, even once, and they dismantled it piece by piece. Lands. They see how the destruction was not singular, but cumulative. 1,000 dismissals, 1,000 small betrayals, 1,000 choices where ego was prioritized over humanity. And this recognition is almost intolerable, which is why it rarely lasts. The defenses surge back quickly, sometimes within minutes, sometimes hours. Rationalizations reappear. I did my best. They weren't perfect either. It was mutual. It wasn't meant to be. Blame disperses. The victim narrative resurfaces. Grandiosity rebuilds, but something remains. In that brief window, before the psyche reseals itself, a narcissist knows. They know the loss was not confusion or incompatibility. It was the outcome of deliberate patterns. It was harm inflicted by someone too defended to receive love. And they know, at some level, that alternatives existed. They could have chosen kindness instead of cruelty, fidelity instead of betrayal, reverence instead of devaluation. They chose pathology repeatedly, and those accumulated choices drove away the only person who loved them authentically. Men's often. This moment of clarity triggers intensified defense. They may abandon therapy. They may plunge into new relationships with renewed intensity, desperate to disprove the truth. They may construct more sophisticated justifications to bury what they briefly saw. Yet they cannot completely erase that glimpse. Somewhere beneath the reconstructed facade, the knowledge lingers. They destroyed real love, not because they were forced to, but because their defenses would not allow them to do otherwise. That truth becomes part of their internal terrain, a wound self-inflicted through harming another. Lind. The tragedy is not only that they destroyed someone who loved them, it is that in their rarest moments of honesty, they know it, they feel it, and still cannot sustain the vulnerability required to change. When you finally see clearly that you dismantled the only person who loved the real you, the defenses do not vanish. They simply labor harder to help you forget.